Our God is a homeless God. He doesn't like to stay in the temples. Rather, he likes to stay with people. In the first reading, we have seen King David is planning to build a temple for God. He built a very beautiful palace for him, and he is staying in the palace, and God is staying in the tent. The Ark of the Covenant, which represents God, is kept in a tent which is made of clothes. And it's been there for 200 years. Now David is worried about God. I am living in the palace and God is living in the poor tent. So he decided to build a beautiful temple for God. He shared this idea with the prophet Nathan. And Nathan said, "You're right, okay, you continue. God is with you." At the same night, God spoke to Nathan and told him, "Tell David, you are going to make a temple for me, but I prefer to stay with the people. You want to make a temple for me, but I will make a temple in your family. So your descendants will be a temple for God." That is how Jesus is born as son of David, and God himself descended into David's family. My dear brothers and sisters, in the Bible, in the history of the humankind, we don't find people are building temples for God. We don't find Abraham is building temple for God. God did not ask Abraham to build temple for me. God did not ask Isaac to build a temple for me. Jacob also did not make a temple for God. The Israelites were in Egypt. They did not make a temple for God. While they were escaping from the captivity of the Egyptians, they were traveling through the desert. They built an Ark of the Covenant where God was present in that. And this Ark of the Covenant they were carrying throughout their journey. And wherever they are camping, they kept the Ark of the Covenant in the middle of the camp. They built a tent for the Ark of the Covenant, and the people were all staying around this tent. So God was staying in the middle of the people, and people were around God. That is the nature of God. That is what God always likes. God stays in the middle, and all people are sleeping around God, staying around God. So this happened for 40 years. When they reached in the promised land, they did not change this. The Ark of the Covenant was with them, and it was in the tent. For 200 years, the Ark of the Covenant was in the tent. They didn't bother to make a big building or a temple for God. But David, when he became the king, he conquered all the enemies with the help of God. And then he built a temple a palace for himself. That bothered him. I am living in a luxurious palace, and God is in the temple, is in the tent. So God was comforting David, my son, you don't have to be worried about me. I prefer to live in the tent with the people. If God is in the tent, it is well protected. It's not kept anywhere freely there. People are around the tent, inside the tent, sacrificing offerings, prayers. So God is always busy in the tent. It's not free, sleeping in the tent. That is what God likes. So that is why God, through Nathan, told David, don't worry about me. I prefer this tent. Instead of this, I will build a temple in your family. I am going to stay in your family. And God is going to incarnate in his family. My dear brothers and sisters, when we look at the birth of Jesus, Jesus was born in the family of David. He is supposed to be king. He is a king, and he is supposed to be born in the palace. But he preferred the manger, the cowshed. He wants to be with the people, with the poor. He wants to understand the people. He wants to live with the people. That's why he preferred the poorest of the poor. His parents were poor. They were not rich. They were ordinary people. And throughout his public life, we have seen in the Bible, Jesus never stayed in his house. We don't find that Jesus stayed in his house. Whereas he was staying always, throughout his public life, he was staying in someone else's house. Somebody else's house. Mostly St. Peter's. When he is in Capernaum, he stayed at St. Peter's house. And most of the time he was sleeping under the tree in the desert, on the way, on the road, anywhere while he was traveling. He is not worried about staying in a house. He likes to be with the people, in the hearts of the people. So throughout his life, Jesus preferred to be one among the people. Now let us look at the first church. The apostles, when they were going out and preaching, they were busy with churches, not building up churches, but building up communities, building up faithful. They never thought of building a church for God, for Jesus. They were all gathering in someone else's house. Sometimes they were gathering under the tree. Some days in the caves. They have no church at all. I have seen some documentary videos about the first Christian communities in Turkey. They were all gathering in caves. And the caves are still there. You don't find that it was a church. It doesn't look like a church. So they were all gathering together in the caves to celebrate the Eucharist. And when they gather together, they celebrate the Eucharist, they eat the bread and go home. Eat the bread, they take Jesus and they go home. All of them, when they gather together to offer the Eucharist, they eat the Eucharist and take Jesus and go home. So Jesus is going with them, not staying in the building or in the house or in the caves. Jesus is staying with the people, with the faithful. So this was the situation in the first and second centuries of our church. Now, when did we start making huge buildings, huge churches? We start building up huge churches when the kings and queens and emperors, they all became Christians. When they became Christians, they started thinking like David was thinking. The prince, the kings, they are all staying in the palace. But God doesn't have a place to sleep. So they start building up big churches. You have seen the churches in Jerusalem. Church of the Sepulchre, the Nativity Church, big buildings. They were all built by, big emperors, queens, and kings. Now we also follow the same custom now. But even if there is a big building, big church, they all gather together. It is built for the purpose of gathering together. Now we have the church here, beautiful church. The purpose of the church that we all, the believers, should gather together and offer the Eucharist, offer prayers. And we all take Jesus in our hearts when we eat the bread. When we eat the bread, we all take Jesus in our heart, and we are taking Jesus into our homes. He likes to stay in our homes, in our hearts, and He is still staying in our hearts and homes. So when we build the church and keep the Eucharist in the church, we make sure that people are visiting the church. We don't keep Eucharist, we don't keep Jesus in the church where there is no Mass at all, where there is no people coming at all. We don't keep. We keep the Eucharist where people are visiting every day, every time. The best example I would like to share with you is our St. Peter Cathedral. All of you have visited the Eucharistic Chapel. 24 hours people are coming and praying there. They don't keep Jesus alone in the church. But throughout the day and night, people are coming, visiting, praying. And God is interacting with the people. God is not sleeping in the church. So, my dear brothers and sisters, today we have beautiful churches around the world. We should not abandon Jesus inside the church and lock Jesus in the church. We lock Jesus in the building and go home. No, we shouldn't do it. If Jesus is in the church, we must visit. We must visit every time. That is why when the Eucharist is here, someone should stay here. The priest is supposed to stay. We are staying here in the church, in every church. Priest is staying in the church day and night. So Jesus is not abandoned or locked inside. So He lies to be in our hearts. That is why He is called Emmanuel. God is with us. So, my dear brothers and sisters, we also decide to make frequent visit to Jesus. Let us always in our mind, keep always in our mind Jesus should not be alone in the church. If we take Jesus every day, it's not that we come to the church on weekends and take Jesus. No, we need to take Jesus every day. Jesus must be with us every day, not for a weekend or alone. So we come here, take Jesus home every day. Jesus likes to sleep in our hearts, likes to stay in our home. But many times, sometimes, people may not like Jesus at home. When we are thinking of committing a sin, we don't like Jesus coming in between. When we decide to do something wrong, we don't like Jesus coming there. We don't like the presence of God when we do something wrong. If Jesus is present here, I don't think nobody will do any wrong thing inside the church. All of you come here to pray. This is the temple, this is the church, this is the presence of God. In the same way, we must feel that my body is the temple of God. God is staying in my body, and we must respect my body as a temple of God. We must respect my body. We must respect others' body. We must always in our mind, keep it in our mind that it is Jesus, it is God residing in my heart. And I should not do anything wrong. I should not commit any sins. God is here. My body is a temple. Let us not make it anything wrong with that. So, God is Emmanuel. He is always Emmanuel. He wants to stay with the people. He is with us. He likes to be in our hearts. God bless you all.